I'll now call the Tuesday, March 26, 2019 regular meeting of council to order, please. Item 2.1, adoption of the agenda for this evening. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson, any additions? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. It's time for public comment. Item 3.1 on items considered as council as part of the approved agenda. I'll read the following statement. Comments and questions will only be regarding an item on the current agenda. Comments and questions put forth must be on topics that are not normally dealt with by village staff as a matter of routine. Comments and questions shall be addressed through the chair and answers given likewise. Debates with or by individual members of council or staff are not allowed during the public comment period. No commitments shall be made by council in replying to a question. Therefore, matters that may require action of council shall be tabled to a future meeting of this council. Most importantly, bylaws, temporary use permits, etc. that have been considered at a public hearing but have not yet received final approval should not be raised during this time. Individuals must state their name and area of residence for identification purposes, and comments and questions will be limited to 2 minutes as deemed by this handy dandy timer. Public comments.
Eugene Jamin, Valemount.
Welcome.
There's a proposed amendment to the Comfort Inn development permit. I have no idea what the extent of the changes they want to make, but I hope that the purpose and intent of the bylaw, the recommendations first, be respected. There might be slight modifications, but I would hate to see that they're given wholesale to do whatever they want to do as far as the appearance of the building. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Motion please to receive public comment. Councillor Pearson, Councillor MacLean. Any comments on the comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. Item 4.1, motion please for the adoption of the minutes of the March 12th, 2019 regular meeting of council. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Item 4.2, adoption of the minutes of the March 12th, 2019 public hearing. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Item 4.2, adoption of the minutes of the March 19th, 2019 special meeting of council. Councillors Blanchette, Councillor MacLean. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Item 5, delegations. Under item 5.1, we have a presentation from our auditors. Awesome. KPMG, Mr. Corey Naftali. Partner, the floor is yours, sir.
Partner, yeah. Howdy, partner. It's always good to start with a laugh. So what we've done in order to kind of facilitate the conversation about the financial statements is we've prepared a PowerPoint presentation. And the reason we've done that is that the financial statements under public sector accounting standards, they're quite lengthy. They have quite a bit of detail in them. So the presentation just serves to summarize the financial statements so that at a high level, we can discuss some of the items that are contained therein. So I've got that on the screen here. My name's Corey Naftali. So what partner means is I'm the partner in charge of the audit. So there's a team that comes out in February that entails a manager and some staff. They'll come and do the field work, but ultimately I'm responsible for signing off on the audit. Do you want me to speak then? Okay. So a little bit of an agenda. So we'll go over the audit report, review the financial statements, and then the surplus and reserves. And then if there's any questions at the end of the presentation, I'm happy to take them. So to talk to the audit report, so as mayor and council, really what you want to hear from your external auditors is that you're getting a clean audit opinion. So what a clean audit opinion means is that all the questions that we asked were answered, and that we feel that the consolidated financial statements are in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, which are the relevant standards for preparing municipal financial statements. So when you have oversight and you look to your auditor to make sure that those financial statements are fair and accurate, that's what you'd want to see as a clean audit opinion. So that's what we anticipate issuing, and why I say anticipate issuing is that ultimately we don't issue our audit opinion until the financial statements have been approved. So after you approve them, then we can issue our audit. So looking at the financial results, so we start with the consolidated statement of financial position. So really this is cut off at a point in time. All municipalities cut their year end off at December 31st. So for December 31st, 2018, these are the balances that were in existence at that time. So these are your financial assets. These are the assets that are like cash or will be turned into cash. So the financial assets of the district were $4.4 million of cash, so that's very similar to cash because it is cash. There's accounts receivable, so that was $1.2 million. And there was an increase in the accounts receivable at the year end because there were a few accruals that were made due to some air access lighting due to the airport project, and also from NDIT for that airport lighting project, which really was the main factor driving the increase year over year from $823,000 to $1.2. Inventory, so there's just a small amount of inventory that's being held with the Village Information Center because now that's being run by the village. So that inventory is property of the village. So we've reflected it there, and it's about $9,700. The investment in the Valemount Community Forest Corp company. So this is a reflection of the equity that the village has in the community forest. So what we do, because it operates on its own and it's a self-sustaining operation, so we treat it like a government business enterprise, which means we do a one-line consolidation of the equity that you have within the community forest. So that one-line consolidation takes all of the assets, less all of the liabilities of the community forest, and it reflects it in this one line on your financial statements. So that's $6.5 million this year, which is an increase from $5.3 million in the previous year. And really what that reflects is it reflects the results of the operations of the community forest for 2018. So the community forest, if we were looking at those financial statements, you'd see that they had profit of $1.1 million. So when we take a look at all of those together, you have $12.1 million of financial assets, so an increase from last year of $9.8 million. So we take a look at the flip side and we have the liabilities. So these are the amounts that are owed at the end of the year. So there are accounts payable and accrued liabilities. So these are your general trade payables that remain outstanding at the year end. So that was about $500,000 compared to $279,000. And again, really this just relates to the timing of some invoices that were received. There were a few from school tax, hydro, urban systems that were all outstanding that were kind of new on the ledger this year compared to last year. So there's an increase of $220,000. Development cost charge reserve fund, so that's increased because there were some new developments during the year. So last year the balance was $171,000. This year it's increased as those monies are being held aside until the costs to do those deferred developments are incurred, and then that'll be brought into revenue to offset those costs. The deferred revenue, so that's $841,000. So this is funding that's been received by the village, but the expenses haven't been incurred, so we don't recognize the revenue until those expenses get incurred. So really the increase here was $288,000 year over year. And really that relates to the Columbia Basins Trust. There were some projects at the end of the year that weren't completed, so we're holding within the deferred revenue balance about $197,000 compared to just over $2,000 last year. So once that gets spent, then that will be brought into revenue to offset those expenses. There's some refundable deposits. So again, these are new. So there's two deposits. There's the Best Western deposit, which is really reflecting the biggest increase here. That was $192,000. That wasn't there last year. So that's driving that balance from $19,000 last year to $261,000 this year. Long-term debt, really comparable, no new debt, just some repayments during the year. So that balance went from $726,000 to $672,000 at the end of the year. So the total financial liabilities at the end of the year were $2.6 million. So the next items that are on your statement of financial position are the non-financial assets. So these are assets that we don't expect to be settled in cash. So really these assets generate some type of service. So a prepaid expense, so you may prepay somebody to mow your lawn. Really what you're going to get out of that is a mowed lawn. You're not going to get cash. So that's why we consider that a non-financial asset. The same with tangible capital assets. So those are the physical assets, the village office that we're in right now, the roads, all those types of things. So you're not actually going to get cash out of those. They just provide a service over their life. So looking at the balance of those, the prepaid expenses are really comparable at 24,000 compared to 17. And then the tangible capital assets, so the physical assets, decreased by 325,000. So there's an amortization or depreciation charge that gets charged each year. That was $567,000, and there were additions that were made for the year of $242,000. So the additions were to the community hall, so there's additions to the shop of $17,000. The interpretation center, there was a new furnace and air conditioning of $20,000. The airport lighting was the biggest project, that was about $200,000. And then there was a Fifth Avenue lift station for about $16,000. So moving on. So the statement of operations. So this is really everything that happened in two lines. So the village brought in revenue of $4.8 million, and there were expenses incurred of $3.5 million, generating a surplus of $1.3 million. So when we look at that revenue, we have to remember that that includes the Valemount Community Forest operations. So that does include $1.1 million of net income from the community forest. So that wouldn't be budgeted on an annual basis. So that's why you'd see such a big discrepancy between the budget and the actual line. And similar results would have been included in the 2017 line items as well. Looking at the expenses, so there was $3.7 million of expenses budgeted and $3.5 million spent. So overall, there was a surplus for the year of $1.3 million. And we'll get into more detail of how that breaks down on the next few slides. So when we break down the revenues in a little bit more detail, usually when I go through these, I like to kind of highlight items that are significant. Really, all of the changes from budget were generally under $50,000. The hotel and resort tax was increased. It was $220,000 compared to $150,000, but that increase was only about $30,000 over the previous year. And same with the provincial transfers. So that was down from budget of $177,000, but really relating to some community service and some different things there. So no major changes from the budget to the actuals there. When we flip onto the next page for the statement of operations, so you can see those, the government transfers from federal, so there's just a little bit brought in, nothing was budgeted. And then the government transfers other, that would have been the Columbia Basins Trust, and again, that's brought in just to match off against the expenses. So that's why there was less revenue that was brought in this year compared to last year and less compared to the budget, because some of that remains in deferred revenue. When we look at the investments, so there was an increase there, but fairly similar compared to the previous year. And then the big item here that's really driving some of that bottom line that's not included in the budget, as I mentioned, was the equity in the income of the Valemount Community Forest. So you can see for the past 2 years, that's generated about $1.1 million. So flipping over to the outflows. So again, just looking kind of at the budget on the left, and in the middle is the actual, and on the right is 2017. As you can see, really, from the budget to actual, they're fairly comparable. General government was a little bit up. There were some expansions to some studies that were done, and some of the Columbia Basins Trust amounts also included there. So overall, nothing really to note here. Fairly consistent with the previous year and in line or less than the budget overall. And same story, really kind of moving down with some of the utilities, the sewer, and the visitor center. So overall, the total expenditures for the year, they were up from last year. So last year was just over $3 million. This year was 3.5, but that was compared to a budget of 3.7. So coming in under budget, but still a little bit more than last year. So when we look at that, so really those are what generate your surpluses. So you do have the annual surplus, which has was a little bit less than last year. These are just the changes. So we start with the accumulated surplus, which includes all of your tangible capital assets, like all of your assets, less all of your liabilities. So it really includes that. It seems like a big number, but it includes quite a few different items within that number. So that started at $21.7 million and ended the year at $23 million. And we can see how that's broken down on the next page. So you can see the vast majority is in those tangible capital assets, $12.8 million. Then the general fund, so the unrestricted funds, increased by about $342,000. The restricted funds, which include that Valemount Community Forest, increased by about $1.1 million. The water utility reserve increased by $111,000. Oops. And the sanitary sewer reserve increased by $36,000. So those are all your funds. So then we move on to the reserves, which include the capital works and machinery and equipment reserve, which increased by $6,000, land sale reserve, which increased by $1,000, the MFA, which increased by just $250, and the MFA sewer, which increased by about $4,300. So really that's a reflection of all the reserves. So you take the reserves and the funds, and that's what gives you the total surplus. We like to just reflect on the fact that there are a lot of notes, a lot of details within the financial statements. This kind of is a bit of a laundry list, but I could probably be up here for a couple hours if we went through that, but that probably wouldn't be too appreciated. So at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions if you had any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naftali. Motion please to receive the delegation. Councillor MacLean, Councillor Pearson, questions from council to the partner of KPMG. Did I see a hand, Councillor MacLean? No. No, okay. Thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate you taking the time to come up and share the audit with us.
Yeah, happy to be here. And happy to just reflect on the assistance that we got from Lori and her team. It was great. We really appreciate it. The team had a great time in Valemount. And we really appreciate the work. So,
and thank you, Mrs. McNee. Do you want to receive the audit? Yes. All in favor of receipt of the delegation? Carried. Motion please to receive the audit. Councillor G, Councillor Pearson, and any questions or comments towards the audit itself. Councillor Blanchette.
Just to thank staff and the auditors, and like you said, Mrs. McNee, she always does a great job. We've always had a great review, and we've never ever had a problem. So thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Yes, Mrs. McNee.
I'll just walk.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All in favor of receipt of the audit? Carried. Item 5.2, Robson Valley Community Services Child Care BC New Spaces Fund. Ms. Thorne.
Good evening, Mayor, Councillors. First of all, thank you very much for receiving us this evening and putting this on the agenda. Thanks to Sylvia for preparing the report. I do have some points. I'm not much of a public speaker, so it'll be quick. It'll be quick.
Will ensure that we get the full audit. Sorry, audio. We just went through the audit.
So first of all, our Executive Director, Ms. Lena Thompson, apologises for not being able to be here tonight. She's away on ministry training. We're growing. Robson Valley Community Services is a registered charity and has been since 1980, delivering services at permanent offices in Valemount and McBride. I think April 1st we'll be at 24 staff, with the majority being in Valemount office, so lots of changes going on, and thanks to the village staff for helping us work with those changes at the last minute. We're successful in our request for proposals to run a dedicated weekly family drop-in centre in Valemount. So this is alongside the other specialised child services that Robson Valley Community Services has offered since 1990. We've held contracts with Ministry of Children and Family Development, I have to get all these acronyms right, since 1990 for family support, for specialised child services, for the infant development practitioner and program, and the supported child development program. So at this time in the funding, Ministry of Children and Family Development have come up with a new Childcare BC New Spaces Fund, which will fund up to $1 million for non-profit organisations to partner with public sector organisations. So what we're asking for is a partnership with the village to provide land in principle to open a child development centre in Valemount. The plot picked, shown on Silvio's report, is on 5th Avenue, right next to the clinic, which we think would be a fabulous location for lots of reasons. What else? We have a strong partnership with Valemount Children's Activity Society. We pay for a full-time staff member to be at the Children's Activity Society to provide support for upwards of 10 children who may not otherwise be able to access the daycare without support. So that's been ongoing for at least 10 years that I know of. It could be longer than that. The daycare staff have submitted a lovely letter of support, which is included in the agenda, and they've let us know that they're full. They're full. They've renovated and renovated and renovated since my kids were little, and there's nowhere room to grow. So the building, it's a fabulous space, but unless we go outwards or build a new building on the side of it, they can't take any more spaces. So this lends us to a lengthy waiting list for infant toddler program. And Robson Valley Community Services has the infant development program, as I mentioned, and they support about 34 infants. The supported child development program supports about 52 children. And then the Prince George Child Development Centre provides outreach down to the valley through Robson Valley Community Services for occupational therapists, speech language, physical therapists. And so we're out of space. We're out of space. So this is why we are asking for approval from village mayor and council for land in principle to explore this funding and see if we could bring a child development centre into Valemount. So there's lots of, a child development centre would support the health centre need for additional staffing. It would support an infant toddler daycare program to assist the current wait list at the Childcare Activity Society. We wouldn't be in direct competition with our services because they're full, and forgive me, Rita, Kinnickers. Canoe Valley Activity Society, I think it is, their application for licensed childcare spaces is for after-school programs, and out of school, Pro D days, holidays, and so on. So we don't see that it would be competing. This is for specialised childcare services. There's many families that have had to relocate out of Valemount and McBride, for that matter, for just because their children have needs and they can't afford to run to Prince George every week. I think Krista spoke to that in her letter. And that it can range from children experiencing autism spectrum syndrome to speech developmental delays. Some of it's temporary, some of it's more permanent, but having the therapist come here once a month and kind of hop around is not always ideal. So to have a facility that we could offer family drop-in, therapists, pediatricians coming into town, eye care, kindergarten testing, all those kind of things would be a real boost to the village. If the Valemount Village and Robson Valley Community Services can work together on this potential is for up to $1 million of funding without a financial contribution from either party. this sounds good. But of course, there's applications and time that's got to be involved to put it into place. But it is possible, and there's other grants that could assist with that. Childcare is a prime point right now with the government funding. It would also bring additional work opportunities to build a new building next to and in complement to the health unit, which is in town. So, are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Motion please to receive the delegation. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson, any questions for the delegation? Councillor Blanchette.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Any further questions to the delegation? Thank you very much. Awesome presentation. Motion please to receive the delegation. Sorry, I've already done that. All in favor of receipt of the delegation? Carried. Thank you. Moving right along, we have a request for support, 7.1. That a letter from council be provided to the Valemount Learning Centre supporting their provision of the settlement assistance program in Valemount. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, any comments or discussion on the letter of support? Councillor Blanchette.
If anything we can do that helps is our duty.
Thank you very much. Further comments, discussion, hearing none, all in favor of support? Carried. Does anyone wish to pull anything out of the reading file? Councillor Blanchette.
I'd like to pull out the letter from one of our citizens by Rashmi Naran, and I'd just like to thank her for the letter. It's great when community members are involved with council issues. So I'd like to thank her for that.
Awesome. Other points of the reading file? I would wish to bring out the letter from the Valemount Health Centre in regards to our water issues in the last couple of weeks along 6th Avenue. And just a big thank you to Superintendent Pelche and his team, Mr. Robinson, of course, for informing the neighborhood. And then there are some specifics where Mike and Blair Dryden, plumbers on the work site, Mark Eddy from Alpine Country Rentals, Richard Danke from RD Mechanical, Rob Dyke from Monashee Motors, and of course, if you need anything done, you call Bob Weeks. So, yeah, that was just everybody kind of collaborated there and had that fix done as quick as they could. Motion please to receive the reading file. Councillor G, Councillor Pearson. All in favor of receipt? Carried. Right on to item 9. Item 9.1, we have an application from the Robson Valley Community Services for Child Care BC New Spaces Fund that be supported in principle. Councillor Pearson. Is there a seconder?
I'm just wondering if Councillor G and I should be stepping out. It's not a financial thing, but it's still, you know, I'm chair and she's an employee.
That makes sense.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for repeating yourself. We still have a quorum.
Yep.
Councillor MacLean.
I actually was curious on how that piece of land was chosen and what if the clinic needs to grow through Northern Health?
Could we have a seconder just to get a discussion on the
Yeah.
floor?
I'll second
Councillor
it.
MacLean, seconder, please.
Yeah. I was curious on how we decided on this piece of land in a prime tourism area, which if the clinic needs to grow through Northern Health, how will that fit in with the Robson Valley Community Services operation next door? I was curious about that.
I can give you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Opening it up for discussion.
So
Sorry, we'll just keep this as a matter of council discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you. You want any advice here?
Sure. When we were listening to, as staff, when we were listening to Robson Valley Community Services, One of the things that came up was that the space being beside the healthcare center actually allows for a lot of integration between Northern Health and this actual space. So you'd be able to bring in a lot of specialists dealing just with children, specifically because it's right side by side. There were other areas discussed. However, it would be a lot more expensive in order to develop those other spaces compared to this one.
So would the proposed building include space for, like we've talked about, eye exams and that kind of thing for other professionals that wish to come in and set up a practice that are more medically for the general population rather than child development? Is there a plan for that?
At this time, no, but there are options for expansion into other ways.
So this particular funding agreement in principle, or the application thereof, is specific to childcare.
Yes.
And I suppose the question is, are there options for other departments to take advantage of not only just that space, but, you know?
I'm not entirely sure. My understanding is yes, but I'm not entirely sure.
Does that almost answer your question?
It almost does. It seems to me it's kind of a touristy area down there next door to an industrial garage, and it would limit the clinic's capacity to expand in any direction if there was that was next door, because the police are right the other way. That's the only way they've got to. So I was just curious as to whether it would impede, you know, in 5 years are we going to be looking at it saying, well, you know, we need this many more doctors, or there's visiting or maybe more medical equipment and they need to expand, and now we can't because this is, the child development is right next door to it. I'm not saying I disagree or that it's wrong, I'm just questioning as to whether we've given that thought.
Is it also possible to have the engineering of said building, for example, in hypothetically, for the purposes of a transition house? For being in proximity of the RCMP, being in proximity of the clinic, for a second story, a third story? Is that something that we should be thinking about down the road as well? You know, not just childcare on the first floor or, you know, the second, but, you know, having a look at being so close to a medical service that, you know, we could certainly take advantage of that through other partners.
Yeah, as multi-purpose as possible.
Yeah.
So just one.
Councillor Pearson.
One quick comment on too. I mean, my first thought too, I mean, when I saw the parcel of land is, I kind of questioned putting a child development center there adjacent to our busiest thoroughfare. So I'm, depending on the footprint of the building, I mean, it would allow for like a playground out the back kind of thing, but it just, that was my concern. I'm 100% in support of it, but that would be my concern, is mitigating the traffic and stuff like that.
So what I'm hearing is that we are in support of an application by the Robson Valley Community Services for Childcare BC New Spaces Fund. Any further discussion on that? All in favor of support in principle? Carried. Now, is this contingent on the property at 1445 5th?
That I'm unaware of. I'll just, perhaps the Economic Development Officer will know that.
Mr. Gislenberry?
No, it's not contingent on that specific property. I had a chance to speak also with Ministry representative, and they said if in the meantime council would approve that, the next step that they would undertake is to do some due diligence work on this site, which would probably include some geotechnical review, survey works, and those kind of things. And at the same time, they are aware that that site may not be the appropriate or adequate site for the project. And and when I had some talks with ministry, of course I mentioned that the village also has other sites available, but of course we did not talk about any other sites. So they are aware there are other sites, so probably you can make a decision where you say, or you make a site in principle available for this project, and maybe it does not need to be restricted to the site on Fifth Avenue. So I think, because also they want to do some due diligence work, and I think what they want to hear is their support. If yes, they will do then the next steps, and they would send somebody to do some real due diligence work on the specific site. And in fact, the next step could be that we also let them know if we have some other sites available.
Thank you. So therefore, the two councillors are no longer in conflict for the site selection.
Not for the site selection.
Bring it back in, please.
I can open it up.
Is that it? Oh, we still have 26 minutes. Ish. Oh. Well, it'll be your responsibility to make sure that clock is on. Thank you. So the next recommendation is that the village-owned property located at 1445 Fifth Avenue be made available in principle for the construction of a facility for special child care spaces, subject to funding approval by the Ministry of Children and Family Development. Motion, please. Councillor Blanchette, or sorry, Councillor Pearson, Councillor MacLean. Discussion. That wasn't already brought up during the support in principle. Hearing none. All in favor of the property located at 1445 Fifth Avenue be made available in principle? Just two?
Well, I mean, we can't be not part of the conversation and then vote on something we haven't heard. We don't know what we're voting on.
In absence of a vote, it is an affirmative.
Yeah, so it is carried. Item 9.2, BC Hydro Electrical Vehicle Charging Station, that staff be directed to enter into an agreement with BC Hydro on behalf of the village for the installation of a BC Hydro Electrical Vehicle Charging Station Level 3 on Dogwood Street between 4th and 5th Avenue. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson, discussion. Councillor Blanchette.
I'd just like to read out, it says, "The purchase, installation, operating, and maintenance costs for the Level 3 charging station are covered entirely by BC Hydro." That's an initiative that we can all get behind because it's not costing the taxpayers anything. It's also a 20-minute charge, so it will also be less, so it's perfect.
Yeah, and the infrastructure that's in place already can handle a second and a third and a fourth. So, further discussion? All in favor to enter an agreement? Carried. Item 9.3, the Columbia Basin Trust Community Initiatives in Affected Areas Program. There are several recommendations. Councillor G.
So, starting with number 1, that the following recommendations from the CBT, CIP, AAP Adjudication Committee be approved by council. So the first one, that the Valemount Sports Day Association receives $64,256.91 for beer garden and concession upgrades. And so I move.
Seconder.
Yep.
Councillor Blanchette, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
Number 2, that the Valemount Area Recreation Development Association receives $55,000 for Phase 5 of the Valemount Bike Trails. And I so move.
Seconder. Councillor MacLean, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
Number 3, that the Canoe Valley Community Association receives $8,652 for the creation of a fenced playground space. And so I move.
Seconder. Councillor Blanchette, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
Number 4, that the Valemount Senior Citizens Housing Society receives $8,113.73 for upgrades at the Golden Years Lodge, and so I move.
Seconder, Councillor MacLean, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
Number 5, that the Valemount Secondary School receives $8,500 for the Clint and Joni Marlerchuk mental wellness presentation, and so I move.
Seconder, Councillor Blanchette, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
Number 6, that the Valemount College Society receives $29,360 for a program marketing project, and so I move.
Seconder, Councillor Blanchette, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Councillor G.
And lastly, that the Valemount Entertainment Society receives $20,366.08 for the purchase of radio satellite receivers decoders, and so I move.
Seconder, Councillor MacLean, discussion. All in favor? Carried. I do see Chair Jamin of the Adjudication Committee in the gallery. Mr. Jamin, thank you so much to you and your team for taking this on this year. It's really appreciated, and thank you, Councillor G, for representing council at that table. Thank you, Mr. Jamin. Item 9.4.
Sorry. Yeah, there's a recommendation to council in item number 7 there.
Item number 7. That the Entertainment Society receives $20,366?
No, it's at the end of the resolutions. The following recommendation was made to council for ratification at the next regular council meeting, that $200,000 of the leftover funding to be put towards another intake for one large project with a large amount for community support. Isn't that an action item, or am I goofing up?
Where is it?
I don't have that on my agenda.
It's not in there.
Mr. Robinson?
I don't know why that is on that agenda. That was specifically removed from the agenda because it is not of the authority for council to make that decision.
Okay.
And it wasn't of the terms of reference. It wasn't within the terms of reference for the committee to make that as well.
So for whatever reason, it just stayed in my thing?
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
The minutes from that meeting were attached to the agenda, I believe.
Right.
And the minutes are a true representation of what was suggested, and that was suggested. However, it didn't make it on the agenda as a recommendation to council for the reasons that CO Robinson pointed out.
But we have sent some information gathering to the CBT?
Yes, that is correct. We have already contacted the CBT, letting them know that we are interested in pursuing, or finding out really from them what options are available to us. So we do await the response.
Okay. I'm special, I've got to keep it in mind.
Thank you, Councillor Blanchette. Item 9.4, the proposed amendment to the Comfort Inn Development Permit DB01-18. There's a few recommendations here, but I will ask that it'll be open for discussion. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Blanchette, discussion. Councillor Pearson.
In looking at the proponents' proposed changes, they're pretty sweeping changes to what was approved by the previous council. In looking at it, I would make a couple recommendations or exceptions to their changes. One, 100% in favor of the change from a shingle to a tin roof. It's just, in this country, I think a tin roof is a lot safer. And I would recommend that we require them to remain a bigger portion of the frontage in stone, possibly up to the ledger between the first and second floors in stone. Not necessarily right to the peak of the roof in the center section, but I mean, if they take all the stone out, it's just gonna be a big ivory colored building, so that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor of receipt of discussion? Carried. Now, we have a couple of recommendations before us. But I will ask for a motion that the proposed amendments to development permit 01-18 be approved with exceptions as directed by council. Motion please, Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson. I heard shingle to tin, okay. Leaving the frontage, especially the frontage with a larger, vast stonework. Further amendments? Councillor Pearson.
I know there was some discussion by the developer to remove that ledger between the first and second floor, and I think we should include that as being, nope, we got pictures, as being maintained.
Just so we don't have the discolorization from 3 stories of drips.
Of dripping water, yeah.
So that was, what do they call that?
I think they called it a ledger.
Precast concrete turn something. Item.
Concrete water table.
Water table, thank you. Water table to remain. Is everyone okay with the subtle color change between the two?
Pretty subtle.
It is fairly subtle. Are you satisfied with the subtle? I mean, there is a color representation there if that helps. The stonework is off a bit in the colorization, but the skivvy of my inquiry is, are you okay with that?
I think once if we keep the stonework where we want it to be, then I think that the different coloring will be okay. It won't be all of a sudden, like that. Yeah.
Was there any other, Councillor Pearson?
One comment too, I'm not sure if it's something we can recommend if they do go to a tin roof, that they pursue investigating some sort of snow stops to relieve a little bit of a safety concern when you've got 2 stories of, or 3 stories of snowfall coming down.
Avalanche alley? I'm sure the proponent or the building inspector will continue to work with the proponent if the tin roof is approved by council.
Okay.
I hope. Further amendments? Hearing none. Shingle to tin, larger frontage stonework, and that the precast concrete remains
Water table.
to avoid drip staining. And then everything else is a go for council? Okay. You have those recommendations down? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, council. That's a big one. Item 9.5, the accounts payable report. Motion please that the February 2019 accounts payable report be received for information. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette. Discussion on receipt. Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Item 9.6, strategic plan report. That the strategic priorities planning document 2019-2022 be adopted as presented. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor Pearson, discussion for adoption. Councillor Blanchette.
Thank you to staff. This is fantastic. Easy to read, concise. Everybody will understand. It's perfect. Thank you.
I think we even get a one-pager coming at us too.
Yes.
There we go. All in favor? Carried. Item 9.7, bylaw compliance recognition. I like this one. Motion please that the staff be directed to launch a positive bylaw compliance program to reward citizens who are actually adhering to certain village bylaws while incentive supplies are available to support this program. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, discussion. Yeah. All in favor? Carried. Bylaws and policies 10.1, Village of Valemount Officers and Employees Amendment Bylaw number 795, 2019, that the Officer and Employees Amendment Bylaw number 795, 2019 be adopted. Councillor G, Councillor MacLean, discussion on adoption. All in favor? Carried. Item 10.2, Village of Valemount Zoning Bylaw 610, 2007, Amendment Bylaw 796, 2019. The recommendation is, we have a couple, an or, that the Village of Valemount Zoning Bylaw number 610, 2017, Amendment Bylaw number 796, 2019 be given first and second reading as presented or as amended. What is council's wish? Councillor Blanchette.
I'll move number 1.
As presented?
Yeah.
Seconded? Councillor Pearson? Discussion as presented? All in favor? Carried. Item 10.3, Village of Valemount 5-year financial bylaw number 798, 2019 be given first and second reading. Councillor Pearson, Councillor MacLean, discussion on first and second. All in favor? Carried. Item 10.4, Village of Valemount Building Bylaw 542, 2003, Amendment Bylaw number 799, 2019, that the Village of Valemount Building Bylaw 542, 2003, Amendment Bylaw 799, 2019 be given first, second, and third reading. Councillor Pearson, Councillor G, discussion on first, second, and third. All in favor? Carried. Item 11.1, council reports. Councillor G.
I don't have anything to report this time.
Lucky.
I know.
Any questions of the council? How did you do that?
Rub my arm.
March was a very busy month, it's just, I was away a lot.
Okay, thank you very much.
Working away.
Yes,
Yeah.
working away,
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Councillor Blanchette?
On the 14th, staff did a fantastic job of doing an open house for the cannabis open house. Unfortunately, I felt it was very poorly attended. I would have liked to have seen more people come out and look and see what we're trying to do and ask questions and give us some ideas, just have a really interactive time. I'd like to thank those people that did come because that helps. But it's a lot of time that staff put together, you know, that do all that hard work, and then I think we had 13 people show up. So it was a bit disheartening. But thank you to staff, because I know you worked really hard, and you did a great job. On the 19th, we had a parcel tax review, and we also had our budget meeting, which went really well. Mrs. McNee always does it really well so that I can understand everything. And on the 25th, we had an elder care meeting, and we're just starting now to plan our fall fair. So if any seniors have any ideas of what they'd like to see at their fall fair, contact me, come and see me at the library, call me at home, find me at the grocery store, wherever I am. We would like to have some ideas because the fall fair is for them and for caregivers and family.
What date is that?
It is probably going to be October 5th, but I'm not positive, but that's what we're shooting for, if that's a Saturday.
Thank you. Councillor MacLean.
On March 13th, I traveled to Nelson, BC to attend a meeting of the Columbia River Treaty Local Governments Committee on March 14th and 15th. This committee was created in 2011 to ensure, among other things, that there is a coordinated venue for local governments and ensure they are actively engaged in the Columbia River Treaty issues. Representatives of local governments throughout the Columbia River Basin were there, and speakers included the BC Minister responsible for the Columbia River Treaty, Katrine Conroy, and the Columbia Basin Trust CEO, Johnny Strylaff, and they were both there. If anybody's interested in staying up to date with this, there is a website. All you have to do is type in the Columbia Basin River treaty negotiations, and it keeps you up to date on all events and reports and how negotiations are going as they work to modernize the treaty. On March 19th, I too attended the special council meeting for the water treatment plant parcel tax roll review and the budget presentation. And that was it for my time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson.
March 13th, sat in on a telecall with Via Rail with Mayor Torgerson and CAO Robinson, discussing ongoing discussions towards a Via Rail shelter and that issue. March 14th, I also attended the cannabis open house, and like Councillor Blanchette, was somewhat disappointed in the turnout for what is a fairly hot topic in town, to only have, less than 20 people show up. It was very informative. We had, with the people that were there, some really good discussions, and so that was that evening. March 19th as well, the parcel tax review, and the 19th, the budget meeting. And on March 20th, I had a call with the Rail Safety Committee, Operation Lifesaver of the UBCM, as an introductory call with the chairman of that committee. That was my 2 weeks.
Nice. March 13th, the morning, Councillor Pearson, Mr. Administrator, regarding conference call with Via Rail. Hopefully we'll be moving forward soon on that file. In that afternoon, upon receipt of an invite from Mayor Runts of McBride, took part in some pretty neat caribou planning from the perspective of both Conforce and other land use planning there. March 18th, or the open house, cannabis, and I concur. Just from the people that were there, it was some pretty good discussion. I met on the 18th with the new general manager of the Best Western, and we had a good conversation surrounding staffing and travel trends. So looking forward to a follow-up there. The 19th, I was in the audience for a water treatment plant parcel tax review, but then participated in the overall budget. March 20th, VARTA board meeting, followed by the next morning in Prince George for regional board meetings throughout the day, and was lucky enough to be nominated chair of the Agricultural Land Use Committee. And then just today had a good overall discussion and a kind of a state of tourism locally here in Valemount with the chair, Christine Latimer of Tourism Valemount. And that concludes my report. Motion to receive reports. Councillor Pearson, Councillor G. Any questions of the reporting? Councillor Blanchette.
How are we coming with the Via Rail shelter? Is there anything to say?
Nothing at this time.
Okay.
Any further questions? All in favor of receipt? Carried. No new business tonight. No reason to proceed in camera. So I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Pearson, thank you.